Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So welcome to another new video on my YouTube channel. So in my previous video, while I was doing this sketch of the view outside the cafe window, I had a cup of mocha and a few bites of a hot cross bun. Just a few bites because I had a really big lunch. And here I'm back home and I'm saving these two buns for breakfast the next day. And before that, I'm gonna sketch them in my art journal because their forms are very interesting. Okay, so as always, I'm beginning with ink line drawing using my Uni-pin 0.8 tip fine liner pen. And the speed of this whole drawing process in this video is 2 times faster than in real life. So these two buns are roughly in the 3-dimensional form of cubes. Okay, so for this one, because I took a few bites, the top square is not perfect anymore. So it's this shape. And now I'm just adding the hot cross on it, the shape that I see. And some wrinkles using very gentle lines. So on the surface and also on the dissection part of all bakery stuff, we see a lot of air bubbles like these. And so I just added those using very simple little circles, following my observation. And now I am drawing the front part of the paper bag and finishing the dissection part of the cube of this bun. So that's pretty much it for this bun in the front. We can see just two sides, the top side with a hot cross and the dissection side where I took a few bites. And now I'm continuing to draw the contour of the paper bag and the wrinkles, drawing the wrinkle lines and adding some sideway hatching lines to show shade to give more definition to the paper bag. And yeah, these wrinkles are very much like fabric wrinkles, very interesting. Lots of organic lines and shapes. Now I'm drawing the contour of this second bun in the back. It's being overlapped by the first bun in the front. This is the top of the square cube. And just like before, I'm drawing the hot cross icing using a lot of organic lines. I'm focusing a lot of time looking at the bun and not judging what I have on paper. Again, adding some wrinkles and hatchings to give some more definition. So that's the top part. Now I'm drawing the side and the bottom. A lot of squiggly lines. So these two buns are roughly cube shapes, but they're not strictly cube shapes. We really have to follow our observations. And keep adding some more organic tissues on the outside and the regions, air bubbles and stuff with short little lines, circles, wriggly lines. And that's pretty much it. Now I am finishing drawing the paper bag, the top part, crossing the page a bit. It's roughly a prism shape squished down, and adding some more wrinkles and hatching lines. The paper bag can be a very interesting subject matter to study because the wrinkles are very satisfying to draw and shade. And also for pretty much like every kind of fabric stuff or paper or the crumpled paper are also very interesting things to study. Okay, so, and also added the parchment paper going upwards. And adding more wrinkles and hatching lines for the parchment paper on top of the paper bag. And adding some words, hot cross buns. Okay, so moving on to the final stage of drawing, I'm adding the opening part of the paper bag, adding a bit of hatching, and writing the distorted letters of the name of the bakery, Terra. Yeah, so again, words or letters on a package, especially with lots of wrinkles and distortions, very interesting to draw. It kind of tells us that, imperfections are actually more interesting than perfect things. Imagine if these letters are just perfectly written straight out without any distortions. They would look less interesting than these. And adding some final hatchings around in between the bun. That's it for the line drawing. And it took me about 10 minutes to draw. Okay, so now I'm ready to paint watercolors. The speed is gonna be real time, okay? Real time speed, so you can see and feel my whole process better. So as always, I like to wet the area that I'm gonna paint first with clear water, so the color can spread out nice and smoothly and lightly. For the first layer, I don't want it to be way too intense yet. I want it to shine. And now I'm adding a bit of yellow ochre for this side of the paper bag. As you can see, I'm leaving a little streak in the middle to show the shine, and adding a bit of more diluted yellow ochre for this part. Super diluted for the area here, because this area is the parchment paper, because the parchment paper is semi-transparent. I can see through and see a bit of color of the paper bag on there. This is still yellow ochre, but as you can see, if we put more or less water into the paint pigment, or in other words, more or less pigment in the water, we're going to have different kinds of tints of the same color. So there's no need to use so many colors to make an interesting painting. Okay, that's for the first layer. Now I'm moving on to the second layer, wet into wet. I just grab some orange, mix with a tiny bit of brown or burnt sienna. And also I switch to my medium tip Sakura Water Brush, so I can do smaller brush strokes. Yeah, so I'm just grabbing this paint once a while, and actually every single brush stroke is actually a slight different kind of orange brown, okay? So I'm just playing around with two colors now, orange and burnt sienna or brown. And again, if I mix more or less water into it, the tone is going to look slightly different. So every brush stroke is different. It brings life. And just adding last bit of color for the crust part of these two buns. And I think that's pretty much it for this vibrant yellow-orange color. Yeah, last bit over there. And now I think I'm ready to paint the surface of the paper bag. Is kind of a red-brown color. So I mix red with a little bit of brown or burnt sienna. And just observing the space that is actually the paper bag and not the parchment paper, because this area contains some overlappings. Yeah, just make sure I'm painting in the right area. And now I see harmony in this sketch, because the crust of the bun's color, the warm yellow-orange, and this warm red-brown are in harmony, because both are warm colors. They're like cousins. And same for these words. It's the same red-brown color. So just use pretty thin brush strokes to color in. And I'm good with the paper bag so far. And now I think I'm ready to move on to the third layer of the bread buns. It needs some more contrast. So I just grabbed some burnt sienna and mix it with the leftover red because the previous layer is already dried. I'm making these brushstrokes, and these brushstrokes are staying pretty solid and not being dissolved by the wet paint. And I want this third layer color to stay nice and crisp on top, not being dissolved down. Yeah, just adding this contrast color, the shade color of the crust as I see. Okay, so now I am just adding little bits of shade here and there with the leftover brown. And now I'm looking, and I think I need to add a little bit more definition for these two hot cross icings. So I just use the leftover gray or purple blue. It's very much diluted, and use these little choppy brush strokes because these two icing parts are not flat. So just adding these shade areas to show the uneven surface. So brushstrokes like these really requires our attention and passion to what we see. And so we can generate these kind of expressions. And okay, now moving on, I'm gonna add some more shade colors using leftover gray or purple blue in between these two buns. With one bun is giving a shadow on the other, but not too much. I still want to preserve the clean quality of these buns. Just a little bit. Was very much diluted shade color using tiny little brush strokes. Yeah, so we're working through a painting as we move to the final stage. It doesn't have to be large, broad brush strokes. It can be very small, almost invisible. And again, using the leftover purple blue color, pretty much diluted to paint the shade of the paper wrinkles. Mixing in more blue because I sense some more bluish shade here. Bluish shade closer to the bun because they are very solid objects and they're giving stronger shadows or shade. Yeah, so just adding this stronger shadow closer to these two buns around their bottoms and wrapping around their outlines. So again, I'm using this shade color using more or less water depending on the tone that I see in different areas of the bun and the paper bag. Yeah, so for this area is a very much diluted gray because I don't want to completely cover the nice vibrant yellow of the paper bag. Even though I'm adding this shade color on top, the original color is still seen through it underneath. So this is one of the lovely things about watercolors. When you're putting one color on top, the original color is not being completely covered. We can see through many layers. And this is the very last stage of painting, and I'm very relaxed, and I'm also doing very minimal work and looking at the real object and thinking about what last little polish that I should add. So for here, this silky parchment paper, which is semi-transparent, I'm adding this super diluted gray because it still has some folds and shade on top there, separated from the paper bag. So the shadows or shade on a piece of paper or fabric can be very subtle, very interesting to study and paint. So right now I'm just playing with different intensity of purple blue or my own kind of gray by mixing less or more water, or in other words, less or more paint pigment, and just add it onto the surface. And remember to leave those super bright spots white to show the difference of light and shade. And lastly, I'm going to paint the shadow of the paper bag. So again, using my recipe for mixing gray, ultramarine blue, and pink purple. Very loosely, just with a couple of brush strokes around the edge of the paper bag, and mixing more ultramarine blue, pink purple, and a little bit of green into it. Less water, so it's more intense. Yeah, a little bit more green. Just use super thin brush stroke to go over the very edge of the paper bag. That darkest, the most intense shadow part, the core shade. Yeah, I think that's it. And here is a look of my finished sketch. So overall, from line drawing to finished painting, it took me 20 minutes in real time. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you liked my video, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel so you never miss a new video on my channel. And I will see you again very soon next time. Have a great day.